All right, so ready to dive into a topic that's pretty important to everyone. I mean, we're talking about personal finance,
Yep.
like
Always a relevant one.
definitely. And specifically today, we're going to be tackling saving versus investing. We've got a whole stack of articles here ready to go, so should be interesting.
It's a good one. It's not always the most exciting topic, saving and investing,
Right.
but it can be really empowering when you start to understand it a little bit better.
I totally agree. It's like having that map instead of just driving around aimlessly.
Exactly.
So, all right, the first article on our list today is titled Saving versus Investing. Which path leads to financial freedom? I mean, who
Yeah.
doesn't love a little financial freedom, right? So, where do we even begin with this?
Well, this article starts by explaining the core differences between saving and investing. And I think it does a really good job at breaking down some of those common misconceptions people might have.
Okay, perfect. Let's unpack that a little bit. First up, saving. We always hear it's about building that solid foundation for the future, like the whole safety net concept.
Exactly. It's that financial buffer for when life throws those unexpected curveballs your way. That sudden car repair or a medical bill or even just a temporary job loss.
Right, having that peace of mind is so important.
Huge.
But I noticed the article also mentioned something about interest rates and inflation, like how saving might not always be the safest bet.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a little tricky. So keeping your money in a savings account is typically considered low risk, but the interest you earn on that often doesn't keep up with inflation.
Hmm, I see. So it's like even though my money is technically safe,
Hmm.
it's really losing value over time because things are getting more expensive.
Yeah, the article had a good example about that. Remember how 10 years ago, like a cup of coffee was maybe $2?
Right.
Now that same cup of coffee is what, like $3, 3.50?
Yeah, at least.
That's inflation at work. So even though you save that $2, you wouldn't be able to buy that same cup of coffee with it today.
That's a good point. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, and that's why simply saving might not be the most effective strategy, especially when we're thinking long term.
Interesting. Okay, so saving is good for that safety net and those short-term goals, but we have to be mindful of inflation.
Hmm.
Got it. So then that brings us to investing, which this article calls the road to rapid wealth. Now we're talking, right?
Yeah, investing definitely has the potential for much higher returns than saving, but it's super important to understand both how it works and the risks involved.
Right, because it's not without its risks. So when we say investing, we're talking about putting your money into assets like what, stocks and bonds.
Exactly. The article uses this analogy of like buying a tiny piece of a company through stocks, or essentially lending money to the government by buying bonds. Of course, there are other types of investments too, but the main idea is you're aiming for your money to grow faster than it would just sitting in your savings account.
Right, so I can see the appeal there. But let's be real, investing has its risks too, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I mean, the value of those investments, they can go up and they can go down.
Yeah.
You could lose some or even all of your initial investment.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, you definitely want to understand those risks before jumping in.
So that's where diversification comes in, right?
Yeah,
Not putting all your eggs in one basket.
exactly. You're spreading your risk.
Hmm.
So instead of putting all your money, say, into tech stocks, you might invest in different industries like healthcare, energy, or real estate.
Mm.
That way, if one area of the market takes a hit, your whole portfolio isn't completely wiped out.
So it sounds like there's a lot to think about. We've got saving, which is important for that foundation in emergencies, but then we have to outsmart inflation, which could be eating away at our money over time. And then there's investing, which has the potential for higher returns, but of course also comes with those risks, and the market going up and down is kind of overwhelming.
It really is. There's a lot to unpack, and that's why I think this next part of the article is really key. It's titled Finding Your Perfect Balance, because it emphasizes that there's no one right way to approach this whole saving and investing thing. It's all about figuring out what works for you, for your goals, how comfortable you are with risk, and your timeline.
Okay, I like that it's personalized because we're not all the same, right? So let's break down those three things the article talks about. First up, financial goals. Seems pretty simple, right? Like, what do you want to achieve with your money? But I'm guessing there's more to it.
Absolutely. I mean, your goals are going to play a big role in how you approach all of this. Let's say your goal is to buy a house in the next 5 years. That's a shorter time frame, right?
Yeah.
So you might lean towards playing it a bit safer, focusing on saving diligently and exploring lower risk investment options.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're, say, in your 20s and saving for retirement, you've got a lot more time to work with, right?
Yeah.
You can maybe handle more of those ups and downs in the market.
Right. It's like choosing which hiking trail you're going to take. You're going to go for the short, leisurely walk in the park, or you're going
Yeah.
to climb that mountain. So, okay, then there's risk tolerance. And I'll be honest, that one sounds a bit intimidating. How do you even figure out your own risk tolerance?
Yeah, that's a big one. The article describes it as a spectrum. You've got some people who can handle those market dips without breaking a sweat.
Hmm.
They get that investing is a long game, and they're okay holding on tight even when things feel a bit rocky. Then you've got others who are checking their portfolios, like every 5 minutes, freaking out over every little fluctuation. Those folks might be better off with a lower risk approach, maybe focusing on preserving the money they have rather than going for those big gains.
I know people on both ends of that spectrum, for sure. So, yeah, it's all about knowing yourself and how you react to those market swings.
100%. And the good news is there are tools out there that can help you figure out your risk tolerance. Like there are online questionnaires you can take, or you can even talk to a financial advisor.
Good to know. Okay, so we've got goals, risk tolerance. What was that third factor again? Time horizon.
Right, so time horizon basically just means how long you plan on investing your money.
Hmm.
And it's a big deal because the longer you're invested, the more time your money has to potentially grow and recover from any short-term losses. Imagine it like planting a tree, right? It takes time for that little sapling to grow into a big, strong oak.
So if I'm investing for retirement like 30 years from now, I've got more wiggle room than someone who's trying to save for a down payment on a house in 2 years.
Exactly. That longer time horizon gives you the ability to wait out those market storms and potentially benefit from something called compound growth, which is basically like earning interest on top of the interest you've already made.
Compound growth. Now that sounds like something I can get behind. Okay, so we've got these three factors all intertwined: goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon. What I'm hearing, though, is we don't necessarily have to choose between saving and investing, right? We can actually do both.
You got it. The article's really big on this whole idea of balanced approach, using both saving and investing together to build a plan that makes sense for you, for what you need right now, but also your dreams for the future. You might have a high-yield savings account for your emergency fund and some short-term goals, while also investing some of your money in a diversified portfolio that has the potential to grow over the long term.
Makes sense to me. It's like having different tools, right, for different jobs around the house. But okay, so we've got all this knowledge, but how do we actually put it into practice? Where do we even start?
Well, the article actually offers some pretty practical tips, and you know what the first one is? Budgeting.
Budgeting. Is anyone actually a fan of that word? I feel like everyone hates budgeting,
Right.
but I get it. I mean, you gotta have a
You
plan.
do. And this article, it doesn't frame it as this restrictive, boring thing. It's more about awareness,
Okay.
like understanding where your money's actually going so you
Mhm.
can make smarter choices.
Yeah, see, I like that better. Spending awareness, not just budgeting.
Exactly. And I think when you actually start paying attention to that,
Right.
it's natural to find areas where you can maybe cut back a little bit, free up some cash
Okay.
to put towards those goals, saving and investing.
Oh, really? You can't improve what you don't track, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've tackled budgeting or spending awareness, I guess. What's next on the list of to-dos?
This article is really big on setting goals. And not just like the vague, oh, I want to be wealthy kind of thing. We're talking about getting specific, really thinking about those financial goals.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful. How do they suggest people go about doing that?
They actually suggest, like, connecting those goals to your values. What is it that you really want out of life?
Right.
So instead of just saying, I want to retire comfortably, think about what that actually looks like. Do you want to travel, pursue a hobby, spend more time with family, make it real?
I love that because if you can actually see it, right, visualize it, that dream trip or that early retirement or even like starting your own business, whatever it is, it's so much more motivating.
It really is. And you need that motivation to stick with it, for the long haul.
That's so true. Wow, we covered a lot in this deep dive. I mean, we talked about building that solid foundation with saving, but also making sure we're outpacing inflation. We explored the world of investing with all its potential and also its risks. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? It's all about finding that balance between saving, investing, and figuring out what works best for your own goals and your comfort level.
Absolutely. And we even give our listeners some really practical tips like spending awareness
Mhm.
and how to set better financial goals.
Right. Knowledge is power. So I always like to leave our listeners with a little something to think about, keep the learning going. So instead of just saying, go learn more about finance, which can feel overwhelming, I want to ask, what's one thing within personal finance that you're really curious about?
I love that.
What do you want to understand better?
Yeah, maybe it's exploring different investment options or like figuring out how to build a diversified portfolio. It could even be those budgeting basics we were talking about earlier. There's something for everyone.
Exactly. Every journey begins with a single step. Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. We hope you found this exploration of saving and investing helpful and, dare I say, even a little bit fun. Until next time, remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your money.